This is a video for AMP2 Lecture Test 1 video, or 5 now. Let me say 5. 5. And I have with me tonight my doggo. This is Pepper the pupper. She is not a puppy. She's about 3. But as you can see, she's a tiny little thing. My husband shaved all her hair off for the summer. So she's our little cutie. And sometimes she'll sit in my lap quietly while I sit at the desk, and I'm more productive when she's sitting on me at the desk because clearly I can't get up. There's a dog. It works against me too, because if I'm sitting in the living room on the couch and she's sitting on me, then I clearly can't get up because there's a dog. So it's just how it goes. All right, so we had left off, we finished the bottom of page 10, and now we're at the top of page 11, and I have officially lost the light. It is evening now. Oh, let me set a timer, or I will talk and talk and talk and talk. So we have a half-hour timer to keep this in a reasonable time frame. Now, I do have on my previous note set a discussion that we have not had yet, and that is the difference between inflammation and infection. And this comes up because we were talking about conjunctivitis, which is inflammation of the conjunctiva or conjunctiva. Let's go back to a whiteboard. Nope. Oh, it like beeped in my earbuds. No. Okay. Let's try this. There it is. Excellent. Okay, so the difference, all right. N-A-M-M-A-T-I. I know I'm writing with a mouse and it's worse than usual. I apologize. Inflammation is the body's response to damage. Infection can cause damage, which causes inflammation. But infection is the work of pathogenic organisms in the body. And of course, the body responds to that damage with inflammation. But you can have inflammation without infection, like, say, chemical damage, like acids or bases, and that can cause inflammation for a chemical burn. Or mechanical damage. Where are you going, Pepper? Yeah? What's up? Oh, look at those ears. Yeah? Well, off she goes. Into the wild blue yonder. Yeah? It's okay. You want to go on your bed? Okay. All right. She'll do what she's going to do. Also, mechanical damage, like road rash, causes inflammation and other things. So infection. So if you have an infection, then you take medicine for it. So what medicine do you take for infections? It depends on the type of infection. So what type of medicine do you take? Oh, that's not what I wanted. That's not what I wanted. Poop. Okay. What's up, Pepper? Okay, distracted. What type of medicine do you take for a bacterial infection? Oh, you are not going to growl at me, little miss. The door's shut, she can't get out. And for a bacterial infection, you take an antibiotic. So anti-A-N-T-I means against, and bio means life. Can you let Pepper out? I'm recording and she hears y'all. Yeah, that's what I'm doing. Thank you, baby. Okay, working. bio means life, and bacteria do meet the criteria for life. And does an antibiotic help a cold or flu? No, because colds and flus are viruses, like SARS-CoV-2 is a virus in the group of coronaviruses. SARS-CoV-2. There was a one and now there's two. So the COVID-19, the 19 part is named for the fact that it came about in 2019, not that it is the 19th. That is a date, not a counted. No. Okay. And then what medicines do you take for viruses? And we don't have any medicines that we have shown help with the COVID-19, which is the disease caused by the virus called SARS-CoV-2. We don't have any medicines for that yet. The hydrochloroquine, they have been doing testing. I'm recording this in May of 2020, in case you're curious why this is so out of date. And as recently, they have been doing some testing for hydrochloroquine for the COVID-19, and more people died because it increases the QT interval, which we will get to when we get to cardiovascular, and people are dying, and it's not a viable option, especially when you combine it with the antibiotic erythromycin. I think it has a Z in it. Anyway, drugs aren't my thing. I don't do drugs. That antibiotic that they are giving for COVID-19 also increases the QT interval. And so combining those two drugs together is causing heart attacks. People who take it for lupus or other autoimmune disorders like RA aren't also taking that antibiotic that increases the QT interval. So it's a bad combo. Okay, so for viruses that we have medicines for, they fall in the class of antivirals. Take an antiviral medication. Anti, of course, means against. So if you have a hand stuff, oh, what about like antibacterial soap? Will that help reduce the incidence of colds and flus? Will that protect you from the Rona? And the answer is no, because colds and flus and the coronaviruses as a group are all viruses, and antibiotics, antibacterial soaps do jack squat for viruses. Jack squat. And so the plus the most common of the antibacterials to go in the soap is the triclosan, and of concern for breastfeeding mothers, the triclosan goes through your milk and into baby. So, no. What about fungal infections? What does an antibiotic do for a fungal infection? Makes it worse. Fungus. When my kids were little, for years, one of their favorite jokes was, why did the mushroom get invited to all the parties? Because he was a fun guy. Yeah. Okay, so for a fungal infection, you take an antifungal medication. Antifungal. And parasites is our last pathogenic organism, our last class. Parasites. And if you have a parasitic infection, you take an anti-parasitic medication. Parasitic. ITIC, antiparasitic. There you go. Okay, so all of that to say, what's the difference between inflammation and infection? Inflammation is a body's response to damage. Infection is caused by pathogenic organisms in the body, and the body responds to the damage from the infection with inflammation. In fact, part of what they're starting to find with the COVID-19 is that death is caused by a cytokine storm, which is a body's overblown inflammation response to the infection. So again, studies are ongoing, still learning new things every day. If that has changed by the time you've watched this, then that's what science is for, to ask questions and look for answers. And forever, in sometimes big ways and sometimes nuanced ways, improve our understanding of reality. And that's what we try to do, to better improve our understanding of reality. All right. Now, if you take an antibiotic, do you take just enough until you feel better and then you can quit the antibiotic? Oh, no. No, 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 no. If you have an inflammation and not an infection, don't take the antibiotic. But if your doctor can tell you this is an infection, you do need the antibiotic, then you take the antibiotic, you take all of the antibiotic, every single bit. Because what happens before you have killed off every single bacterium that is causing problems is you kill off just enough of them to decrease the symptoms so you feel better. But you've killed off like the weak ones and you've left the strong ones because those take more doses to kill. And so if you don't take all of your antibiotic, you're contributing to antibiotic resistant bacteria, which is what will really be the end of civilization as we know it. So let's try to put that off for a few years, yeah? If you take the antibiotic, you take every dose. If you don't have a bacterial infection, don't take an antibiotic. Like if your kid is sick and you take them to the doctor and the doctor says it's a virus, it's not a bacterial infection, there's nothing we can do for it, do you like throw a fit and demand antibiotics? Because to be fair, your kid is sick and there is nothing worse than watching your kid be miserable and not be able to help them. But do you throw a fit and demand an antibiotic for a cold or a flu? No, absolutely not. What do you do if your doctor says, well, this is a cold or flu, it is not a bacterial infection, and then they give you a prescription for an antibiotic? You find a better doctor. So say we all. Okay, so we were on, that was bottom of page 10, and then we were about to start the top of page 11, and we're about to talk about the same picture that we just talked about, but in more detail. Now, I'm curious, what is the next picture? There we go. Let's turn the laser pointer on so that I can turn the page. Oh, okay. And here you see the visual axis goes to the fovea. It's from what you're looking at to the fovea. And you can see a lot of things really clearly in this picture. It's actually a great picture. Okay, next. The outer layer of the eye is the fibrous layer, and it has two parts. The white of the eye is the fill in the blank, sclera. Anterior to that is the clear cornea, and the border between the two is the corneoscleral junction or corneal limbus. And of course, at the level of the corneal limbus or corneoscleral junction is where you find the sclerovenous sinus or canal of Schlemm, which is so fun to say. Next is the vascular layer, also called the uvea. The middle layer of the eye is the vascular layer or uvea. Fill in the blank. And the uvea includes three parts: the iris, ciliary body, and choroid with a CH. And the functions are, number one, make sure we're in screen here, a route for blood vessel and lymphatics. That's why it's called the vascular layer, because it's for the vessels. Vas means vessel. Two is regulate the amount of light in the eye, and that will be the ciliary, I'm pointing at the screen again. It'll be the ciliary body. The ciliary muscles will contract or relax, putting more or less tension on these suspensory ligaments. They changed the name of those too, which changes the shape of the lens. And you may recall I said in passing earlier that the function of the lens is to bend the light so that it focuses right here on this indent called the fovea. And so if the light focuses in front of the fovea or behind the fovea, then you have blurry vision. And so the ciliary body, the ciliary muscle in the ciliary body contracts or relaxes to put more or less tension on these. They rename the suspensory ligaments. I'll think of it, or I'll find it in the note set. And that changes the shape of the lens because it's normally spherical, and so more tension pulls it flatter, less tension allows it to be more spherical, and that changes the angle of the light as it comes through, focusing it on the fovea. Okay, so number two regulates the amount of light in the eye, which was not what I was talking about. I was talking about number four, which it controls the shape of the lens, which is the ciliary body. Number two is it regulates the amount of light in the eye, and we'll talk about that also, but that's the intraocular muscles of the iris contracting or relaxing to dilate or contract your pupil to allow more or less light in the eyeball. And then number three secretes and reabsorbs the aqueous humor, that is also the ciliary body. Number four. That was number four. The iris. That's where we are. We're at the iris. I do have a timer going, right? Oh, yeah. Okay. We're about 15 minutes. We're halfway through. The hole in the center of the iris that allows light inside the eyeball is the pupil. And you can see here the edge of the iris, and that's the pupil. The iris contains the smooth muscles of the eyeball. Here we go. And these are the sphincter pupillae and the dilator pupillae. Are these the new terms or the old terms? These are the new terms. Yay. Okay. I didn't write down video 5 yet. Just a second. Video 5, note set, page 11 through. Okay. Move this to page 11. All right, I'm caught up. If I don't have my post-it, then I won't be able to post what page numbers are covered in the note set. So middle of page 11, we continue. The hole in the center of the iris that allows light in the eyeball is the pupil. The iris contains smooth muscles of the eye, the sphincter and dilator pupillae. The pupils dilate in response to sympathetic activation to allow more light in. Sympathetic is fight or flight, of course. And the pupils constrict in response to parasympathetic activation, which, as we all know, is rest and digest, or some people call it feed and breathe. And so, yeah, we'll say that in a second. Explain differences in eye color, and it's the number of melanocytes and the colors of melanin. There are different colors of melanin. So with fewer melanocytes, the light bounces off of the pigmented epithelium at the back and it reflects out blue. And with more, less light is reflected, and that's how you get green, hazel, brown, or black. Okay, and when the radial, those are these, so you see these lines in the iris, those are the dilator pupillae muscles. And you can't see the constrictors from the outside of the eye, but you can kind of see the lines, the radiating lines of the dilator pupillae. When the radial dilator pupillae muscles contract, so when they contract, they get shorter, and so that pulls the edges of the iris of the pupil larger, so that dilates the eye. They have chemically dilated this person's eyeballs and then put lights on them, and that looks super painful. I don't know how they're not crying. Anyway, so the radial dilator pupillae muscles contract, the pupil gets larger, allowing way more light in. This is especially useful in dim light conditions and is called dilation. When the constricting sphincter pupillae muscles, and a sphincter muscle is a circular muscle, so when it contracts, it gets smaller in diameter. So when the sphincter muscles contract, the pupil gets smaller, and that allows less light in, and it's useful in bright light conditions, and it's called constriction. And that's page 11. Flip. And then we have these already for you to draw in the muscles, draw in the dilator and sphincter pupillae muscles in the diagrams below. Which muscle in the iris contracts to dilate the pupil? The dilator. The pupillary dilator muscle. The dilator pupillae dilates. Which muscle in the iris contracts to constrict the pupil? The sphincter pupillae. Why change the size of the pupil? It's, I don't think I have this in the old Noteset. Yeah, that's new. Okay. Why change the size of the pupil? In bright light, there's way more photons, and you can actually not burn out your retinas, but once you've seen a photon, it takes time to, after the bleaching, to fix it so that you can see again. So if you have too many photons coming in your eyeball all at once, it's just like at night when you see a bright light, like headlights, and then you can't see for like a second. Yeah, that's what we're trying to avoid. And in dim light, you dilate the pupils to get more light in. More light is more information. So that's why you, in sympathetic stimulation, dilate your eyes because more light is more information. In parasympathetic stimulation, if you're just sitting on the couch watching Netflix, and then the pupils can constrict because it's not a life or death situation. You're just relaxing, conserving energy, not using energy. Okay, and the ciliary body, which I'm assuming is the next slide. There we go. So the ciliary body is a thickened region deep to the corneal limbus or corneoscleral junction. The ora serrata is the anterior edge of the retina, or like I like to say, where the retina ends. The ciliary muscle is the smooth muscle ring in the ciliary body that makes up most of the ciliary body. And the suspensory ligaments have a new name. Here it is, the ciliary zonule. We found it. Ciliary zonule. And the ciliary processes are the parts that make the aqueous humor that we're probably about to talk about. The choroid is in between the external sclera and the internal retina. Because remember, where the retina ends at the ora serrata, the choroid name changes here from choroid to ciliary body. An extensive capillary network delivers, okay, we weren't ready for that slide. An extensive capillary network delivers nutrients, takes away waste, same as every other capillary network. Next page. The inner layer is the retina. Now we're ready for the next slide. Boom. The retina has a thin outer pigmented layer, or pigmented part. Is layer the new one, or is part the new one? I think layer is new. And a thick inner neural layer, neural part. The neural layer ends anteriorly at the ora serrata, as we know. And the functions of the pigmented layer, here's the pigmented part. And what happens is it catches and absorbs excess photons without the dark pigment in the pigmented layer or pigmented part, whichever one's the new term, I don't remember. So without that dark layer, the photons can kind of bounce around inside the eyeball and then you get visual echoes. And in fact, this will be the reason why some people with albinism have poor vision, have low visual acuity, because without the melanin, melanocytes, and the pigmented part of the retina absorbing those excess photons, they do get visual echoes with photons bouncing around inside the eyeball. So that's why. The outermost layer of cells in the retina are photoreceptors. And there are two main types of photoreceptors, and they are rods and cones. So the rods do light detection. They're more at the edges of the retina, and they are most useful in dim light conditions. The cones are responsible for color vision. There are lots in the fovea, which is the center of the macula, and they are responsible for vision in bright light conditions. And then we have a new set of photoreceptors other than just rods and cones. And they are the intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells. The lowercase I, lowercase b, p, capital R, capital C, capital G. The IPRCG. And so they help feed reflex control of your circadian rhythm. So your circadian rhythm, if you don't know, is your day-night, sleep-wake, light-dark cycle. And so these photoreceptors in the retina are responsible for feeding that information to the relevant parts of the brain and keeping your circadian rhythm on track. So if you're trying to sleep more or on a more regular schedule, then part of your strategy is to monitor your light levels. So it's more important waking up the same time every day than going to bed at the same time every night. So first thing you do is start setting an alarm, wake up the same time every day. And when you do wake up, you want to convince these IPRCG cells that it is light. So you turn lights on as soon as you can stand it, or you go outside, or you open your blinds and be in natural light for a solid hour to convince your brain that it is daylight and it is time to be awake. Conversely, when you're trying to fall asleep, an hour before you want to be in sleep or in bed or sleep, then you start shutting down the lights. And the blue light is more likely to keep you up than the red and orange lights. And that's why so many of our electronics now have a red shift or a night shift or dark shift or dark setting where it's black background instead of a white background. And that does make a big difference in you being able to fall asleep. If you're watching TV, some people buy those orange glasses to block the blue light so that everything that they look at has that orange shift or red shift. So dimmers, less lights. If your electronics don't dim or redshift, consider just shutting those things off and not looking at screens if you're trying to fall asleep. Just an option. I know, but it really does help. Okay. We were talking about intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells and why we turn the electronics off at night if we want to sleep. Okay, or redshift. There are around, oh, I have these numbers. I think. There we go. There are around 125 million rods with an M, mostly on the edges of the retina. There are 6 million with an M cones, mostly towards the macula. And the macula is the center, it's the area with the fovea centralis in it. Macular degeneration is one of the leading causes of blindness in the US, which makes us very lucky. There's the timer, we're at 30 minutes. Because in most parts of the world, blindness is caused not by macular degeneration, which comes with age, but with parasitic infections and damage to the eyes and lack of health care and all kinds of things. So, okay, so let's finish this page and then we will shut this down, and I probably won't do another one tonight because I'm getting off topic. The center of the macula, which has lots of rods, is the fovea centralis. I don't know if they call it the fovea centralis anymore. I think they just call it the fovea now. And the fovea is the center. Let's see if I have anything else. It's the site of sharpest vision. It's the highest concentration of cones. And it is an indent, a shallow depression. Okay, the line between your fovea and what you're focusing on is the visual axis that we saw in a picture. We had a visual axis and there it is. The visual axis, what you're looking at, lined up with your fovea, which is the indentation. So that's your visual axis. Going back. There we go. Okay. All the rods and cones receptor cells synapse with bipolar cells. And they are the sensory neurons. The rods and cones are photoreceptors, they're receptor cells, whereas the bipolar cells are sensory neurons. And they synapse with a second layer of sensory neurons called ganglion cells. Every time we have a neuron somas in the PNS, they are called a ganglion, and so you have a thin layer of those ganglion cells. In between acting as facilitators or inhibitors are the horizontal cells and the amacrine cells, and they play an important role in facilitation and adaptation, which is inhibition, and they help adjust to dim bright light conditions. And then do we have the, okay, that works. So that was pages 11 through 13. We got through 3 pages on this video. Okay. And I already set the first video to load on Canvas. It takes time. And in the process, I managed to X out the tab that had your intro video. So I'm reloading that because life goes on. All right, so that finishes page 13. There are 24 pages in this note set, so we are more than halfway through. So I will see you what for me will be tomorrow, because I'm done recording for tonight. And we will start at the top of page 14. This has been a video lecture for AMP2 lecture test 1, video number 5, Noteset pages 11 through 13. And thank you, as always, for tuning in, and I appreciate your patience. And oh, you got to see Pepper the pupper. She's so cute. So thank you, as always, for tuning in. The education must go on. Dr. J out. As soon as I find the command control escape, command control escape. Have a good one.